Don't move." The words were sharp, trembling in the air like the snap of a breaking twig. At the forest's edge, under the dimming light of evening, a German shepherd named Rocco stood rigid. His amber eyes locked on the darkness between the trees. His body quivered with tension, but not from fear. Something deeper, something more unsettling had stilled him. His ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring, every muscle drawn tight as if the silence itself had commanded him to wait. The forest stretched ahead in a curtain of shadows, where the last threads of daylight tangled in the branches. It was quiet, too quiet. Even the usual chorus of crickets seemed muted, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. Rocco's paws pressed into the cool earth, claws digging into the soil, yet he did not cross that invisible line where meadow gave way to wilderness. He simply waited, as if sensing a fragile heartbeat hidden within the thickets behind him. The farm lay still, the fields slumbering under dusk. But here, on this threshold, the world felt charged like a storm about to break. A sudden rustle snapped through the silence. Rocco's head jerked, tail stiff, his growl swelling low in his chest but stopping halfway. Caught between warning and uncertainty, something small was moving, cautious and unsteady. Just beyond the tangled roots, then it appeared. From the undergrowth emerged a baby fox, its fur tangled with burrs, its legs trembling with exhaustion. Its eyes, wide and glassy, caught the faint glow of evening light, shimmering with equal parts fear and desperation. It froze at the forest's edge, one paw lifted mid-step, staring up at the dog as if caught in a spell. For a moment neither moved. The shepherd's breath came heavy and measured, while the fox's sides rose and fell with frantic, shallow gasps. Rocco lowered his head slightly, ears twitching. His instincts screamed conflict: predator and prey, hunter and hunted, but there was something in that tiny creature's trembling form that unsettled him. The fox wasn't running, it wasn't fighting, it was waiting, just as he was. Another rustle from deeper in the forest sent the baby fox flinching, pressing itself low to the ground. The shadows shifted. Rocco's gaze flicked past a little figure to the tree line where the faint snap of a branch hinted at something larger moving just out of sight. His growl deepened, not for the fox, but for what might be lurking behind it. The standoff stretched. Seconds bled into heartbeats, each one heavy with unspoken tension. Rocco took one cautious step forward, paw pressing into the dirt. The fox shivered but did not retreat. Their eyes locked again, and in that fragile tether between them hung a question neither could answer. Was this an encounter of chance, or something more dangerous drawing them together? The air thickened with unease. A crow cawed sharply overhead, its wings slicing the sky as if to announce a warning. The fox's ears flicked, its body quaking. It looked not at Rocco, but back toward the forest, where the unseen movement stirred again. Something was following it. Rocco's body stiffened, hackles rising as he turned his head toward the dark. The baby fox, too weak to flee, pressed itself against the earth, a small, vulnerable shadow against the towering shepherd. And in that moment, as the forest breathed out another crack of movement, the dog made a choice not with words, but with silence, with the way he stood taller, placing himself between the trembling kit and the shadows beyond. The forest edge no longer felt like a boundary, it felt like a battlefield waiting to reveal its enemy. And as the night deepened, only one thing was certain. Whatever had driven the baby fox out of the trees had not yet given up the chase. Rocco stood like a sentinel at the forest's edge, the low growl vibrating in his throat as the night pressed closer. The baby fox trembled at his paws, its tiny chest rising and falling with fragile breaths, too exhausted even to crawl back into hiding. The shepherd's ears flicked toward the trees, where the faint crackle of movement grew louder, deliberate, like something circling. His instincts told him to chase, to protect the land he guarded. But another force, something softer yet equally commanding, held him still. The fox's wide eyes clung to him with a silent plea, as though it already understood that this stranger stood between life and death. The underbrush shuddered again, and this time the shape of a larger figure shifted in the dark. Two amber glows blinked through the tangle of branches, eyes reflecting the last strands of fading light. A second fox emerged, but not a helpless kit, this one lean and ragged, with a gaunt frame and teeth bared in warning. Its fur was patchy, ribs showing with hunger, and its stance was desperate, not proud. It wanted the baby back, yet not with the tenderness of kin. Its stare was sharp, hungry, torn between blood and bone. Rocco stiffened, his body angled protectively, placing himself fully in front of the trembling kit. His growl rose into a bark that shattered the stillness, booming across the meadow. The older fox flinched but did not retreat. It circled, eyes darting from Rocco's imposing frame to the helpless body pressed into the dirt. The shepherd's tail lashed, teeth flashing in the dim light, yet the predator lingered, calculating. The twist of the moment was unmistakable. This was no simple accident of nature, no harmless crossing of paths. The kit had fled from its own kind, and the forest had followed it here. The truth struck like a blade. The baby wasn't lost. It was being hunted. Rocco's heart pounded, but not with fear. His breath steamed in the cooling air, hot with resolve. Every instinct urged him to drive the older fox back into the shadows, to prove himself the unchallenged guardian of this threshold. Yet in the baby's eyes, there was more than fear of its pursuer. There was confusion, betrayal, and the fragile ache of abandonment. The older fox crept closer, lips peeling back with a hiss. The kit whimpered, shrinking further into the earth, its tiny body trembling with the raw memory of teeth snapping at its heels. Rocco snapped his jaws with a thunderous crack, lunging forward just enough to send a warning. The fox halted, ears flat, but its hunger smoldered. This was not over. For a heartbeat, silence returned, heavy and unbroken, the meadow and forest waiting for the outcome. Then, as if sensing the futility of challenge, the older fox backed into the shadows, its glowing eyes fading into the dark like lanterns extinguished. But its retreat was not surrendered, it was a promise to return. Rocco exhaled, muscles loosening, slightly, though his eyes never left the tree line. Behind him the kit stood weakly, lifting its head to watch the forest where its pursuer had vanished. Its whimper cracked into the quiet, thin and aching. For the first time, Rocco turned to look at it fully. In its gaze was no wild threat, no suspicion of the predator that most foxes carried toward dogs. Instead, there was a trust too raw to ignore, as if the fragile creature understood the choice he had made to stand against its hunter. But safety was fragile here. The forest did not forgive weakness, and the shepherd knew it. The danger was not gone, only waiting for another chance. Rocco's paws shifted, circling the kit, sniffing the air with sharp urgency. He knew the older fox would not be the only shadow lurking tonight. And the kit, left without protection, could not survive another chase. The meadow felt smaller now, pressed in by darkness. The farm lay only steps behind, familiar ground where walls and hands offered safety. Yet to carry this wild creature there was to invite chaos, to blur the line between domesticated loyalty and the tangled laws of nature. Still, Rocco lingered, his amber eyes burning with conflict. Leave the kit, and it would not see dawn. Stay with it, and he would defy the very instinct that told him the wild must belong to the wild. The baby fox trembled again, weakly pawing at the soil as though begging him not to turn away. The night wind swept over them, carrying the faint echo of a howl deeper in the forest. It was not the cry of a pack, it was lonelier, sharper, the voice that belonged to the one who had just retreated, the call of hunger. Rocco's chest heaved with decision. He could not undo what had been set in motion. The forest had cast its outcast into his shadow, and now its fate was tangled with his own. With a deep, rumbling breath, the German shepherd bent low, nudging the trembling kit with his nose. The baby flinched, then stilled, curling instinctively against the warmth of his fur. The forest's edge no longer felt like a boundary, it felt like a line he had already crossed. And as the night deepened, the truth grew heavier. Whatever force had driven the baby fox into his world was not finished. Something darker had begun, and Rocco was no longer just a guardian of the meadow. He was the shield between this fragile life and the unforgiving wild. The night had deepened, and the forest seemed alive with unseen whispers. Rocco stood unmoving, his body a wall of muscle and willpower, shielding the trembling baby fox pressed close to the ground. Every sound carried weight, the creak of branches in the wind, the distant shrill of an owl, the faint crunch of something heavy moving through the undergrowth. The German shepherd's chest swelled with each breath, but inside, his instincts wavered between duty and doubt. He was bred to guard, yet here he was protecting not his farm, not his people, but a fragile wild creature he should have chased away. The fox whimpered softly, a sound so faint it nearly disappeared into the night. Ere Rocco's ears flicked back toward it, and for a heartbeat he glanced down. The kit's eyes were wide, glassy with exhaustion, and in them burned the helpless plea of something that had known too much fear in too short a life. That look did something to Rocco. He had seen prey before, had smelled its fear, but this was different. The baby fox wasn't begging for escape, it was begging for safety. And though every lesson of nature urged separation, Rocco could not turn away. The unseen presence in the woods moved closer. A branch cracked, sharper this time, deliberate. Rocco's growl rumbled through his chest, low and dangerous, echoing into the silence. He stepped forward, tail rigid, shoulders hunched, daring the forest to reveal its secret. The fox pressed tighter to the earth, its tiny frame quaking as though it knew what was coming. And then, from the dark, the answer revealed itself. A larger shadow slipped between the trees. Its eyes glowed faintly in the low light, hungry and unflinching. A fox, but not a Khitan adult, gaunt and wiry, its ribs showing through a thin layer of fur. It stalked forward with slow, calculated steps, lips curled back in a snarl. The truth hit Rocco instantly. This was not a parent searching for its young. This was a predator, driven mad by hunger, and the trembling baby was its prey. Rocco's stance shifted. His paws dug deep into the soil as he placed himself fully between the kit and the advancing figure. The two predators locked eyes, one desperate, the other resolute. For a moment, time slowed, and the night air thickened with primal challenge. The adult fox hissed, lowering its head, inching closer, while Rocco's growl deepened into a thunderous warning. But then came the twist, another rustle, another shadow, From the opposite side of the tree line more shapes emerged. Not one, but two additional foxes, their movements silent but their eyes glimmering with the same hunger. Rocco's heart thudded like a war drum in his chest. This was no lone threat. It was a desperate family, perhaps a pack, circling, calculating. The baby fox whimpered again, and the sound nearly broke the tension. Rocco flicked his ears back, just for a second, as if to reassure it without turning his gaze from the danger ahead. His mind was split, instincts shouting conflicting orders: protect, attack, defend, run. But he did not move. The forest seemed to close in, shadows shifting like predators themselves. The three foxes fanned out, their paws silent against the ground. They were gaunt, starving, and reckless, the kind of animals that would risk everything against a stronger foe. Rocco's growl vibrated through the soil, his body rigid, his eyes burning with defiance. He was alone, outnumbered, and yet he stood. The baby kit, sensing the storm tightening around them, did something unexpected. With a sudden burst of energy, it pressed forward, stumbling until its tiny body brushed against Rocco's leg. It was no longer cowering at the forest's edge, it was seeking refuge in the shadow of the dog. Rocco froze at the touch, his breath catching, as though that small act had tethered him to the creature's fate. The first fox lunged, not fully, not yet, but a testing snap of jaws meant to measure courage. Rocco's response was instantaneous. He surged forward with a snarl so deep it split the silence, teeth bared, eyes blazing. The fox recoiled, startled, but did not retreat far. The others circled, pressing closer, drawn by desperation. The battle line had been drawn, though no blow had yet landed. The baby fox quivered behind him, the night around them tightening like a noose, and Rocco, the lone shepherd standing guard at the forest's edge, knew the coming moments would decide everything, not just for the trembling creature at his side, but for the strange, fragile bond that had formed in the space between them. The air was thick with hunger, fear, and defiance. The forest waited, silent, as though even the trees leaned forward to witness what would happen when survival itself forced predator and protector to collide. The forest was no longer silent. Every sound seemed sharpened, amplified, carrying with it the weight of menace. The wind hissed through the branches, carrying the musky scent of predators, and Rocco felt it coil in his chest like a warning. The baby fox pressed closer to him, trembling so violently that its tiny body seemed to shake with the rhythm of fear itself. Rocco's ears shifted, catching the faint pad of movement weaving between the trees. Whatever hunted the kit was still near, circling, patient. The German shepherd's instincts screamed at him to retreat, to lead the fox away from the tree line and into safety. Yet his paws would not move. He was bound to this spot by something stronger than fear, an instinct that defied reason, a duty he had never been taught but felt in the marrow of his bones. He lowered his head and released a growl that rumbled like distant thunder, a sound that spoke not of violence but of warning. The forest listened, the predator listened, then the sound came, a low snarl, guttural and sharp, carrying from the shadows. Yellow eyes flickered between the branches, and the shape of a lean, hungry figure revealed itself. A vixen, gaunt and desperate, her muzzle stained with the signs of a long hunger, stepped into view. Her gaze locked not on Rocco, but on the trembling kit at his side. For a moment, the shepherd's confusion deepened. This was no wild chase, no simple predator stalking prey. This was the mother, starved and unhinged, torn between instinct and survival, circling back toward the child she had abandoned in fear of her own weakness. The twist cut like a knife through the tension. The baby fox's cry broke the silence, high-pitched and plaintive, a sound of recognition and yearning. It stumbled forward, its fragile legs carrying it toward the mother's shape, but the body moved before thought could intervene. He blocked the path, chest low, teeth bared, a living wall between the kit and the gaunt shadow. His heart pounded with the force of two truths colliding: the child's desperate longing and the danger that clung to its mother's frame. The vixen snarled, hackles rising, yet there was something broken in her posture. Her ribs jutted sharp. Beneath her fur, her breath wheezed with every exhale, and her eyes burned with a feral emptiness that was not born of cruelty but of hunger. She took one step forward, but the shepherd's roar split the air, shaking the stillness to its core. The baby fox whimpered, caught in the terrible space between protection and blood. Time seemed to fracture. Rocco's mind throbbed with questions he could not answer. Was the mother truly a threat, or simply a creature undone by her own struggle to survive? Could the tiny fox survive without her, or would his protection become its prison? The forest itself felt like it leaned closer, waiting for the shepherd to decide, to choose between mercy and defiance. The baby fox pressed against Rocco's paw, its eyes wide with confusion, torn between two worlds it did not understand. The shepherd bent his head, nudging the kit gently backward, his growl softening as though to reassure it, but his gaze never left the vixen. She circled slowly, her steps uneven, her hunger pushing against the wall of his will. Every inch of her body screamed desperation, but every inch of his screamed resolve. A sudden crack in the forest shattered the fragile balance. Another figure emerged, a shadow of fur and teeth. Another fox, this one a rival male drawn by the scent of weakness. The vixen spun, her snarl no longer aimed at the shepherd but at the intruder. Rocco's hackles bristled as the kit cowered. Beneath him, what had begun as a standoff had shifted into something far more dangerous, far more unpredictable now. It was no longer about hunger or abandonment. It was about survival, for all of them. The baby fox whimpered, its tiny cry swallowed by the gathering storm of snarls. The shepherd's pulse raced as he realized the truth. His role was no longer simply to protect, but to decide who would stand, who would fall, and whether this fragile life trembling at his side would ever know peace. The forest edge quivered with tension, each heartbeat pounding like a drumbeat toward the inevitable. The night had turned into a battlefield, and with one wrong move, innocence would be lost in the teeth of shadows. The clearing held its breath as the three figures faced one another, the night pressing in heavy around them. Rocco stood at the center, his chest heaving, the kit trembling at his paws, while the gaunt vixen snarled at the intruding male fox. The forest seemed to hold the weight of every heartbeat, the hush of the wind and the flicker of starlight above painting the moment. With an almost unbearable stillness, Rocco knew instinct could push everything into chaos within seconds, but something deeper than instinct kept him grounded. He could not let violence claim what little innocence remained. The rival male lowered his head, lips curling back, but his eyes burned with more hunger than fury. He advanced with deliberate slowness, every paw pressed into the soil like a claim. The vixen met him with a desperate lunge, her body frail yet fueled by the last reserves of a mother's will. They clashed briefly, teeth flashing in the half-light, but the shepherd's roar thundered over them both. It was not the bark of a domestic dog, nor the growl of a wild beast. It was a sound torn from the depth of loyalty, a warning that seemed to echo through the trees themselves. The foxes froze, their instincts reminded that here stood a protector who would not yield. The vixen's body trembled, her eyes darting between Rocco and her child. Her hunger fought against recognition, but the soft whimper of the baby fox pierced through her feral haze. For the first time, her stance faltered. The rival male hesitated, sensing weakness, but another roar from Rocco forced him back into the shadows where the forest swallowed him whole. Silence returned, broken only by the frantic breaths of the mother. Rocco lowered his head, his gaze no longer blazing with threat but softened with something else, something that lived beyond words. He nudged the baby fox gently forward, a small push that carried more meaning than any gesture he had ever known. The kit stumbled, uncertain, then looked back at the shepherd with eyes shimmering in the dark. For a moment it seemed afraid to leave the safety of the warm body that had shielded it from harm. But then it turned to its mother, whose quivering form now waited with a desperation that was no longer feral but fragile. The fox kit took one step, then another. The vixen lowered herself, her muzzle brushing against the earth as if bowing to the mercy of the moment. The distance closed, and when the child finally pressed against her chest, a tremor of recognition shivered through her thin frame. She curled around it, fragile yet protective, hunger momentarily silenced by something stronger than survival, by the bond she had nearly lost. Rocco remained still, his breath steadying, his heart finally loosening the grip of tension that had held it captive. The forest no longer felt hostile. Its darkness now seemed softer, as though the trees themselves had bent in quiet approval. The shepherd turned his gaze away, allowing mother and child their reunion, his role completed not through dominance, but through restraint. Yet even as peace settled over the clearing, there lingered a shadow of truth. The vixen was weak, her future uncertain, and the kit's survival still fragile. But tonight, they had been given another chance. Rocco had no way to know if they would endure the hunger, the cold, and the endless dangers that pressed upon their kind. What he did know was that he had stood in the gap, and for one fleeting moment, he had given life the space to choose its path. The shepherd turned toward the meadow, paws sinking into the dew-soaked grass. He did not look back, because he didn't need to. Behind him, a mother's quiet whimper mixed with the soft rustle of a kit pressing closer to her warmth. Ahead of him, the night stretched wide and endless, a dark canvas broken only by the glimmer of stars dotted the edge of the forest, where shadows and light blended. Rocco paused. His ears twitched to the faint sounds of life resettling, the insects beginning their song again, the trees whispering under the weight of the breeze. The world for now was whole. He lifted his head high, his silhouette framed against the horizon, neither conqueror nor victim, but something quieter, something harder to define, a guardian, unseen yet undeniable. And as he walked back toward the quiet fields, the forest behind him no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a secret, carrying the memory of a night when mercy held back the jaws of hunger, and when a bond fragile, imperfect, yet unbroken was given one more chance to survive.